Sometimes you just want a massive open world to explore with tons of content that'll keep you hooked. Getting completely lost in a game map can actually be super appealing, right? That's why I put together this list of 10 game maps that are so huge, you'll seriously lose track of where you are. I mean, all these games look amazing and will pull you in for an unforgettable experience in the open world. No matter what kind of games you usually like, I bet you'll find something cool here. So let's dive into the first game. This is a game that I feel like got a lot of unfair criticism when it first came out, and I've talked about this before, but man, the map in this game is genuinely massive, and you will absolutely get lost in it. And I don't just mean physically lost, though that happens too, but lost in the sense of you're just riding your bike through the Oregon wilderness and 3 hours go by and you're like, wait, what was I supposed to be doing? Because this game just has this way of constantly distracting you with stuff to do. So the setup is you're playing as Deacon St. John, this gruff biker dude in a post-apocalyptic Oregon that's been overrun by these zombie-like creatures called freakers. And the whole game is basically you riding your motorcycle through this huge open world, doing missions, surviving, dealing with hostile human camps, and oh yeah, fighting massive zombie hordes that can have hundreds of freakers in them. And the map is split up into different regions, and each region is pretty huge on its own. You start in the Cascade region, which is the southern part of the map, and this is where the game teaches you the ropes. You've got your buddy Boozer with you, you're doing jobs for different survivor camps, there's Copeland's camp and Tucker's camp, and you're building up trust with them by doing missions and bringing in bounties and clearing out freaker nests. And Cascade alone is big enough that you can spend 20-30 hours there just doing side content and exploring before you even move on to the next region. But here's the thing about Days Gone's map that makes it feel so massive. It's the bike. You are on your motorcycle for probably 70-80% of the game, and the bike mechanics are actually really in-depth. You need to manage your fuel, you need to upgrade your bike, you need to repair it when it gets damaged, and you're constantly looking for gas cans or stopping at gas stations. And because you're on a bike, the world feels bigger because you're covering ground at a decent speed, but you're also vulnerable. You can't just fast travel everywhere. I mean, you can fast travel, but only to specific locations, and only if you have enough fuel and your bike is in good shape. So a lot of the time, you're just riding through the world, and that's when you get lost in it. The terrain in Oregon is really varied too. You've got dense forests, mountain roads, lakes, rivers, valleys, abandoned towns, highway systems, and the game does a really good job of making it all feel distinct. The Cascade region feels different from Belknap Crater, which feels different from Lost Lake, which feels different from the Highway 97 area. Each region has its own vibe, its own environmental hazards, its own types of freaker infestations. And the map is layered vertically too, which is something I don't think people talk about enough. You'll be riding through a valley and you'll see a Nero checkpoint up on a hill and you need to figure out how to get up there. Or you'll be exploring and you find this cave system that leads underground, or there's a waterfall and you can go behind it and find a hidden bunker. The game rewards exploration in a lot of ways, and there are collectibles and lore items scattered all over the place. The thing that really makes you get lost in Days Gone, though, is just the act of riding through the world. The game has this really satisfying loop where you're riding from point A to point B, and along the way you see something interesting, maybe a Nero checkpoint or an ambush camp, or you hear a horde nearby, or you see some survivors being attacked by freakers, or you find an abandoned car that might have loot, and you're like, okay, I'll just check this out real quick, and then you spend 30 minutes clearing that out, and then you're low on gas, so you need to find fuel, and then you see another thing, and before you know it, you're on the complete opposite side of the map from where you were supposed to go. The hordes are probably the most infamous part of Days Gone, and they tie into the map in a really interesting way. So there are 40 plus hordes scattered across the map, and each horde has anywhere from 50 to 500 freakers in it. And during the day, a lot of these hordes are sleeping in caves or buildings, and at night they come out and roam around. And you can track them on your map once you discover them, and you can see their migration patterns, where they sleep during the day, where they feed at night. And this means certain areas of the map are basically no-go zones at certain times because there's a massive horde there. I think one of my favorite things about exploring Days Gone's map is just the atmosphere. The game nails this post-apocalyptic Pacific Northwest vibe. The forests are overgrown, nature is reclaiming everything, there's this sense of desolation and beauty at the same time. And the game has some really great moments where you're just riding through a valley as the sun is setting and the lighting is gorgeous and it's quiet except for the sound of your bike and the wind and maybe some distant freaker sounds. And then other times you're riding through a storm at night with lightning flashing and rain pouring down, and you can barely see, and you're just trying to get to safety. Now, I will say, the map can feel a bit repetitive after a while. Like, once you've cleared a bunch of ambush camps, they start to feel pretty similar. The freaker nests are all basically the same. You sneak up, throw a Molotov or incendiary, burn it down. Some of the side missions are pretty generic fetch quests, or go here and kill this type stuff. But I think the core loop of riding around, scavenging, fighting, clearing areas, it's satisfying enough that it didn't bother me too much. I know, the Ubisoft bloat is a real thing. I get it. We've all felt that fatigue where you look at a map screen and it just looks like someone sneezed icons all over the place. But here's the thing about Odyssey. Even if it is bloated, even if it is absolutely packed with question marks and camps and caves you'll probably never even see, there is something undeniably magical about this version of ancient Greece. It feels like a genuine Odyssey. You start on Kefalonia, right? And it feels like a decent-sized game just there. You've got your vineyards, your statues, your drama. But then you get your ship, the Adrestia, and the world just explodes open. You're sailing across the Aegean, the water is that perfect crystal clear blue. Seriously, the water tech in this game is still unmatched. And you see a massive island in the distance, and you realize, I can go there. I can climb that mountain. I can fight a minotaur in that labyrinth. And what I really dig about this map is the variety. You're going from these pristine white marble cities like Athens, where you're bumping shoulders with Socrates and Pericles, to these dense autumn-colored forests, to volcanic islands, to snowy peaks. I found myself just turning off the HUD sometimes, which, by the way, I highly recommend you do, and just getting lost. The scale actually serves the gameplay loop here too, because you're playing as a mercenary, right? You're a Misthios. You're supposed to be this wanderer traveling from war zone to war zone. The map size sells that fantasy. When you have to travel from the bottom of Crete all the way up to Macedonia, it feels like a journey. It takes time. You encounter storms, you get hunted by other mercenaries. So yeah, if you want a game where you can sink 100 hours in and still feel like you've only seen half the world, Odyssey is it. It's messy, it's gigantic, but it's a grand adventure in every sense of the word. Just maybe don't try to clear every single question mark, or you'll lose your mind. Grab some pizza, sit back, and just enjoy the sail. Just Cause 3 is absolutely insane in the best and worst ways possible. And when we're talking about maps that are so huge you will literally get lost in them, this is like the perfect example of quantity and scale over everything else. Because the map in Just Cause 3 is enormous, like genuinely one of the biggest open world maps I've ever played. It's this fictional Mediterranean island nation called Medici, and it's not just one island, it's like a whole archipelago of islands. There are 3 main regions, and each region is made up of multiple islands, and the whole thing is just massive. And you traverse it all with this combination of grappling hook, parachute, and wingsuit that makes you feel like the most overpowered action hero ever. So you play as Rico Rodriguez, who's this over-the-top action hero guy returning to his homeland of Medici to overthrow the dictator General Di Ravello. And the whole game is basically about causing as much chaos and destruction as humanly possible to liberate the country. Like, the core gameplay loop is you go to a town or military base and you blow up everything. Propaganda speakers, statues of Di Ravello, fuel tanks, satellite dishes, radio towers, whatever. And once you've destroyed enough stuff, that location is liberated and it becomes part of the rebellion. And you do this across the entire map, hundreds of locations. And it's both incredibly satisfying and incredibly repetitive, which I'll get into. But let me talk about the map itself, because it's genuinely breathtaking in scope. Medici is split into 3 main regions: Insula Fonte in the south, Insula Dracon in the east, and Insula Striate in the north. And each region is huge and has its own geographical identity. Insula Fonte is more Mediterranean and coastal, with beaches and port towns, and it's got this classic Italian Riviera vibe. Insula Dracon is more mountainous and alpine, with snow-capped peaks and ski resorts and forests, and Insula Striate is more arid and industrial, with quarries and military installations. And these aren't small islands. Like, the total playable area is something like 400 square miles, which is absolutely massive. And here's what makes the map feel even bigger: the verticality. Like, you're not just traversing horizontally across these islands, you're going up and down constantly. You've got massive mountains that you can climb to the top of, you've got valleys and canyons, you've got coastal cliffs, you've got underground cave systems, you've got structures built into mountain sides. The altitude variation in this game is insane. You can be at sea level on a beach, and then 5 minutes later, you're at the peak of a mountain that's like 3,000 feet high, and the view from up there is incredible. You can see for miles tiles, you can see other islands in the distance, you can see the whole landscape spread out below you. And the traversal system is what makes exploring this massive map actually fun, because if you had to drive everywhere, it would be a nightmare. But Just Cause 3 gives you the best traversal mechanics. You've got the grappling hook, which lets you latch onto basically anything and pull yourself toward it, or pull objects towards you. You've got the parachute, which deploys instantly and lets you glide through the air, and you've got the wingsuit, which is new to Just Cause 3, and it's a total game changer. Once you unlock the wingsuit, which happens pretty early in the game, you can basically fly across the entire map. And the way these three tools work together is so satisfying. Like, you grapple to the ground to build momentum, then you deploy the wingsuit and you're gliding through the air at high speed, and then you grapple again to maintain altitude or change direction, and you deploy the parachute to slow down and land safely. And once you get the rhythm down, grapple, wingsuit, you can traverse huge distances really quickly, and it feels amazing. Like, I would just spend hours wingsuiting around Medici, not even doing missions, just flying through valleys, under bridges, between buildings, over lakes, just enjoying the sensation of flight. The map is absolutely packed with stuff to do too. Like, there are over 130 settlements and military bases that you need to liberate. There are towns, villages, military installations, Di Ravello monuments, bridges, ancient ruins, ski resorts, airports, seaports, all scattered across the islands. And each one has a set of destructible objects that you need to blow up to liberate it. The power fantasy is real in this game. Like, by the time you've unlocked all the gear mods and weapons, you're basically a one-man army. You have unlimited C4, you have powerful rocket launchers, you have jets and helicopters on call, you can survive falls from any height because of your parachute and wingsuit. You're unstoppable, and the game leans into that. It's not trying to be realistic or grounded, it's trying to be a crazy action movie where you're the over-the-top hero causing explosions every 5 seconds. I will say, the game can feel aimless at times. Like, once you've liberated a few regions and you've unlocked most of the gear mods, the gameplay loop doesn't really change. You're still just blowing up the same types of objects in different locations. Some people will love that and just want to 100% the map, but others might get bored and move on before finishing everything. So we have to talk about Cyberpunk 2077 and Night City. I think I've said it before, but I have a real soft spot for games that don't just give you a map, but give you a place that feels like it's actually trying to overwhelm you. Night City is the ultimate version of that. It's a massive, beautiful, and absolutely suffocating example of urban design that manages to be a full meal of a setting. Now, if you look at the raw numbers, the map is roughly 75 to 110 square kilometers, depending on how much of the Badlands you're counting. That might sound smaller than something like The Witcher 3, but what makes you genuinely get lost here isn't just the horizontal distance, it's the verticality. This city is built in layers. You've got these massive, monolithic, brutalist structures and neon-drenched skyscrapers that literally block your sight lines. Most open-world games let you see a mountain or a landmark and walk straight toward it, but in Night City, you're constantly turning corners, taking elevators, or navigating weird off-ramps. You feel small and meaningless, which is exactly how a merc in a corporate dystopia should feel. The way this world is broken up into districts is just incredible. You've got the high-end, sleek neo-militarism of the city center where the megacorps live in these fortified fortresses, but then you drive 10 minutes and you're in the industrial smog of Santo Domingo, where the decaying abandoned holiday resorts of Pacifica. Each area has its own threat rating and its own distinct vibe, and then you hit Dogtown in the Phantom Liberty expansion, where the whole place feels like a lawless, claustrophobic cage. And man, the Badlands. That's where you get that Death Stranding feeling of an arduous trek. You go from the crushing density of the city to these vast, polluted desert plains where the sky is choked with oil fields. It's a total contrast. You'll be driving out there, listening to the wind and the distant hum of an AV, and the sense of scale just hits you. It feels like a real physical journey every time you leave the city limits. Is it a little janky sometimes? Sure. You'll still see the occasional mindless NPC or an illusion-shattering glitch, like someone walking into a burning car. But for the most part, when the quiet writing hits, you start to learn the language of the streets, finding shortcuts through back alleys, and figuring out which Ripperdoc has the gear you need to reach that one rooftop you've been eyeing. By the time you finish your journey as V, you feel like you survived a city. It's a massive achievement in world building that I'm probably going to be thinking about for a long time. It's a good-ass game that finally delivered on that promise of a living, breathing digital sprawl. There's something special about a road trip, and I don't just mean hopping in a car to go to the store. I mean the journey. And honestly, that is exactly what Final Fantasy 15 is. We have to talk about the world of Eos because, dude, this map is deceptive. It is massive. You jump into the regalia, that's your car, your baby for the whole game, and you just drive. And the thing is, unlike a GTA or a Saints Row where you're just kind of zipping around, this game wants you to feel the distance. You're literally driving for minutes at a time, watching the landscape shift from these arid, dusty deserts to lush, green plains, and eventually to the coast. And yeah, the car's a little on rails, I know, some people didn't vibe with that. It can feel a little restrictive when you want to just tear off-road, but it adds to that feeling of being on a long, arduous trek with your boys. And that's where you really get lost, not just directionally, because you will get turned around trying to find a parking spot or a specific hunt location, but you get lost in the rhythm of it. You're driving, Prompto stands up to take a picture, Gladiolus is reading a book, and you just see this massive rock formation in the distance and think, can I go there? And usually you can. You pull over, you get out, and you just start running. And let me tell you, running in this game, you feel the scale. Noctis has infinite stamina if you do the little green bar trick, thank God, because you are going to be hoofing it across some seriously empty spaces. And I say empty, but it's that realistic empty, right? It's not Ubisoft clutter every 5 feet, it's wilderness. You'll stumble onto a massive beast that is way too high level for you, like an adamantoise just chilling, effectively being a mountain itself, and you realize just how small you are in this world. It definitely has its jank, we gotta be real here. You'll try to climb a rock and slide down, or you'll run into an invisible wall that makes no sense, and yeah, that can be frustrating. It's not Breath of the Wild climbing. But when night falls, that's when the map changes. The daemons come out, these high-level monsters that spawn at night, and suddenly this massive open world feels claustrophobic. You're terrified, you're scrambling to find a haven or a campsite, and camping is the other half of this map. You aren't just exploring to clear fog of war, you are looking for safe spots to cook food. But finding those sanctuaries, setting up the tent, and looking through the photos Prompto took of the actual places you visited that day, it grounds the map. It makes Eos feel like a place you actually traveled through, not just a level you played. It's a flawed masterpiece for sure. The back half of the game gets linear, we all know that, but that first half, just roaming around Lucis, taking hunts, finding dungeons that are genuinely scary and dark, it's a vibe. It's a road trip simulator with swords and magic, and if you let yourself just sink into it, turn off the HUD maybe and just drive, you are going to get lost in the best way possible. Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 is doing something that I think a lot of open-world games are genuinely afraid to do these days. It is forcing you to actually look at the world, not just a mini-map in the corner of your screen. If you played the first game, you remember the woods, right? You remember getting turned around. Well, the sequel takes that concept and basically doubles down on it. We're looking at 2 totally distinct maps here. You've got the Bohemian Paradise region around Trotsky Castle, and then you have the city of Kuttenberg. And look, on paper, you might hear 2 maps and think, okay, loading zones, smaller areas. No, these places are massive. The Trotsky map is dominated by these huge volcanic rock formations and castles that you can see from miles away. And that is key because the game, especially if you are brave enough to play on the harder settings without the GPS markers, expects you to navigate like a real person would in the 15th century. You were literally looking at the position of the sun. You were looking for a specific shrine at a crossroads or a weirdly shaped tree. It grounds you in the environment in a way that feels almost overwhelming at first. You step into a forest, and because the vegetation density is so high and the lighting is so realistic, you lose your bearings instantly. You panic a little bit, and that is the point. And then you have Kuttenberg. I cannot stress enough how much of a jump this is from the first game's Rattay. Rattay was a village. Kuttenberg is a metropolis. It is messy, it is winding, and it is confusing. You have these silver mines underneath it. You have districts that bleed into each other, and you will get lost in these alleyways. But it feels intentional. You're supposed to feel like a peasant from the countryside walking into the big city for the first time and getting completely swallowed up by the scale of it. The developers over at Warhorse, they clearly prioritize scale and atmosphere over gamified convenience. You don't just fast travel everywhere because you actually want to ride your horse through these fields. It is a slow burn for sure. It asks a lot of you. You have to be patient with it. But when you are 3 hours deep in the woods trying to find a bandit camp with nothing but a vague description in your own eyes, and you finally stumble upon it as the sun is setting, man, there is nothing else like it. It feels earned. It's huge, it's daunting, and it is absolutely worth getting lost in. Far Cry 5 has one of those maps that feels way bigger than it actually is, and a lot of that comes down to how it's structured. Instead of one massive open space, it's split into regions, and each region feels like its own self-contained world. Once you're in one, you tend to stay there longer than you expect, and that's how the game starts to mess with your sense of direction. The terrain does a lot of the work. You've got winding roads, rivers cutting through the land, thick forests, hills, and farmland that all kind of blend together after a while. There aren't many towering landmarks you can constantly orient yourself around, so you end up relying on roads and instinct. And because roads curve and branch constantly, you'll take a turn thinking you're heading somewhere familiar and realize you're completely off course. Traversal also plays a big role here. You're driving, flying, boating, wingsuiting, and swapping between all of it constantly. That sounds convenient, but it actually makes things more disorienting. You cover huge distances very quickly, and the map doesn't always give you a clear sense of how far you've gone. You'll land somewhere and have to pause for a second like, wait, where am I right now? The world is also aggressively distracting. You rarely move in a straight line for long. Something is always happening nearby, whether it's an outpost, a random encounter, or chaos breaking out on the road. You respond to one thing, then another pops up, and suddenly your original objective feels miles away, both literally and mentally. What's interesting is that Far Cry 5 doesn't really want you to memorize the map. It wants you reacting moment to moment. That keeps things exciting, but it also means you're rarely forming a clean mental layout of the region. You know areas by vibes and danger levels, not exact geography. Even when you think you've got a handle on things, the game likes to pull control away from you. Missions can trigger dynamically, regions escalate, and you're constantly being nudged into situations you didn't plan for. That breaks your flow and keeps you slightly off balance. Ghost of Tsushima is a really interesting one for this list because it gets you lost in a much quieter, more intentional way. At first glance, the map seems pretty readable. It's an island, it's clearly divided into regions, and visually everything is extremely distinct. But once you're actually playing, the game has this way of pulling your attention away from the map itself and into the world, and that's where orientation starts to slip. A huge part of that comes from how navigation works. You're not constantly staring at a minimap or a waypoint, you're following the wind, watching the environment, paying attention to visual cues. That's immersive, but it also means you're navigating more by feel than precision. You head in a direction, adjust slightly, and keep moving, and over time, you realize you're not exactly sure where you are on the island anymore. The terrain reinforces that. Tsushima is full of rolling hills, forests, tall grass, winding paths, and uneven elevation. Sightlines are constantly breaking. You'll crest a hill thinking you're close to something, then dip into a valley and lose all visual reference points. Because everything is so beautiful and cohesive, areas start to blend together, especially when you're riding fast. Side activities are another big factor. Almost everything interesting in this world pulls you off the road. Shrines, fox dens, bamboo strikes, hot springs, camps. You spot one thing in the distance, head toward it, then spot something else along the way. The map encourages this chain reaction of curiosity, and before long, your original destination feels irrelevant. The island also opens up gradually, and each region changes the tone and atmosphere. New enemy types, harsher terrain, colder environments. That shift makes the later areas feel unfamiliar again, even if you've already spent dozens of hours in the game. You're relearning how to move through the world as it gets more dangerous. What really seals it is the pacing. Ghost of Tsushima wants you to slow down. Duels, exploration, traversal, even combat have this deliberate rhythm. When you move at that pace, you stop checking the map constantly, you trust the world to guide you. And once you do that, losing your sense of direction becomes part of the experience. By the end, Tsushima feels less like a map you've mastered and more like a place you've wandered through. You don't remember it by grid lines or fast travel points, you remember it by moments, scenery, and paths you took without really planning them. Next up, we have Horizon Forbidden West. And look, I know everyone talks about graphics with this game, and yeah, it is undeniably a looker, maybe one of the best looking open worlds ever made. But the actual map itself, it is ridiculous. Guerrilla Games took the foundation of Zero Dawn and just blew the doors off it in terms of variety. We are talking about a trek that takes you from the red rocks of Utah all the way to the overgrown, sunken ruins of San Francisco. And the transition between these biomes is what gets you. You start in the Daunt, which feels familiar, right? But then you push further west and suddenly you are hacking through these incredibly dense, humid jungles where the foliage is so thick you can barely see 5 feet in front of you. Then you're shivering up these massive, freezing, snowy peaks, and finally you hit the coast. Seeing the Golden Gate Bridge half submerged in the ocean with robot crocodiles swimming around it, that is a vibe you just do not get anywhere else. But the real game changer here is the verticality. The first game kept you pretty grounded. Here, you get the shield wing glider, you get the polecaster, and eventually, spoiler alert, but you probably know this by now, you get the sunwing. Being able to just hop on a robot pterodactyl and fly over the entire map completely changes your perspective. You look down from the clouds and realize just how massive this world actually is. You see these little skirmishes happening between machines miles away, or a storm rolling in over the desert, and you realize the scale is just off the charts. And I have to mention the underwater stuff. Usually water levels in games are, well, they're painful. We all know it. But here, you get that diving mask and suddenly a whole new world opens up beneath the surface. I'm specifically thinking about Las Vegas. You go into the desert, you find these dunes, and then you dive down into the flooded ruins of the city. Seeing those neon holograms flickering underwater in the dark, it is genuinely haunting. It creates this loop where you set a waypoint for a main mission, but then you see a Tolmec walking in the distance, or you spot a weird ruin on a cliffside, and 3 hours later you realize you haven't made any progress on the story. You're just existing in the world. It's dangerous, it's aggressive, but man, it is absolutely worth getting lost in. I think I've talked about this game a million times already on the channel, but dude, when we're talking about game maps that are so huge you will literally get lost in them, this is like the perfect example. And I mean that in the best way possible, but also like in the most frustrating, hair-pulling, where the hell am I kind of way. Because From Software, these guys had never made a true open world game before this, right? Like Dark Souls, Bloodborne, Sekiro, those are all interconnected worlds. They're brilliant, they loop back on themselves in really clever ways, but they're not open worlds. And then they just come out swinging with Elden Ring, and it's like, okay, we're just gonna make one of the biggest, most dense, most layered open worlds maybe ever. And it's insane. So like when you first start the game, you're in Limgrave, and Limgrave alone feels massive. You're coming out of that little cave area after character creation, and you see that tree sentinel on horseback, and you're like, okay, cool, I can go fight that guy, or I can just explore. And the game just lets you go wherever. Like there's this whole lake area, there's Stormvale Castle looming in the distance, there's the Weeping Peninsula to the south, and you think, okay, this is the map. This is pretty big for a Souls game. And then you realize, oh no, this is just the tutorial area, this is just the beginning. Limgrave is like maybe 15–20% of the entire map, if that. And here's the thing that really gets you lost in Elden Ring. It's not just horizontally huge, it's vertically layered in ways that, like, I don't think any other open world game has really done. Because you have the surface level, the lands between that you're exploring, right? But then there are these wells, these holes in the ground that you can drop down into, and suddenly you're in the Siofa River or the Ainsel River. And these are entire underground regions that are just as big as some of the surface areas. There are entire cities underground that you can completely miss if you're not paying attention or exploring thoroughly. And that's not even getting into the Deep Root Depths or the Mogwin Palace area, which is this whole blood-soaked underground region that you access through this teleporter or through Var's questline. Let me talk about the surface world though, because like the progression of areas in this game is wild. You start in Limgrave, and let's say you make your way north through Stormvale Castle. And Stormvale itself is like this massive legacy dungeon that feels like a whole Dark Souls area condensed into one castle. And then you get to Liurnia of the Lakes. And Liurnia is this huge region with the Academy of Raya Lucaria in the middle, but it's got all these lakes and islands and the manor to the north. And you can spend dozens of hours just in this one region, finding all the caves and catacombs and mini dungeons scattered around. Like, the scope of this game is absolutely insane. I played through Elden Ring, and my first playthrough was like 120 hours, and I thought I'd seen everything, and then I started a second playthrough, and I was still finding new caves, new dungeons, new areas that I'd completely missed. There are like 200 plus locations in this game if you count all the minor dungeons, catacombs, caves, heroes' graves, evergals, ruins, churches, everything. So first off, the obvious thing. The sheer physical scale of this map is ridiculous. When you look at it on paper, yeah, it's big, but that's not the whole story. The real trick Rockstar pulled is how dense it feels without ever feeling cluttered. You can ride for literal real-time minutes, sometimes 10, 15 minutes, and nothing important happens. No mission prompt, no collectible ding, no big cinematic moment. It's just bland. Hills, forests, swamps, rivers, weather rolling in, and that's where people get lost because the game never rushes you and never pulls you back onto a golden path. You'll be riding somewhere specific, like, okay, I'm just heading to Valentine, and then you notice smoke in the distance, or you hear a gunshot echo off a hillside, or you see a cabin way off the trail that looks abandoned, and suddenly you're not going to Valentine anymore. Now you're deep in the woods, your horse is tired, it's starting to rain, and you've somehow crossed into a totally different biome without even realizing it. And that biome variety is a huge reason this map messes with your sense of direction. You've got snowy mountains up north where visibility can drop to almost nothing and landmarks disappear the second a blizzard rolls in. You've got the heartlands, which feel deceptively open and safe, but because they're so wide and flat, everything looks the same after a while. Then there's Lemoyne, which is a nightmare in a very specific way. The swamps are dark, foggy, twisting waterways, and half the time your minimap is lying to you because the land paths don't match what you're seeing in front of you. Saint Denis deserves its own mention because that city alone can make you feel lost even after dozens of hours. The streets are tight, layered, noisy, and alive. NPCs everywhere, trams cutting through intersections, alleys that all start to blend together. You're used to navigating wilderness by instinct, by silhouettes and terrain, and suddenly you're boxed in by brick walls and identical streets. What really sells the getting lost feeling, though, is how natural navigation works in this game. Rockstar doesn't rely on towering Ubisoft-style landmarks every 5 seconds. Instead, you're learning the world the way a person would. You remember places emotionally. Oh yeah, that's where that ambush happened. That's the river where my horse almost drowned. That's the hill where I watched a thunderstorm roll in at sunset. You stop thinking in terms of fast travel points and start thinking in memories. And once you're doing that, you're already lost in the map, because now the world owns a part of your brain. The wilderness encounters make this worse in the best way. You'll get sidetracked by something small, like helping a stranger, tracking an animal, or following footprints, and those activities physically drag you off the main roads. Trails disappear, forests get thicker, suddenly the lighting changes, the music fades out, and you realize you haven't seen a sign or a building in a long time. That's when Red Dead 2 feels almost survival-like, even though it's not trying to be. You start checking your cores, your ammo, your horse, just because you don't know how far you are from anything familiar. Mad Max is a map that gets confusing in a very different and very hostile way. At a glance, the world doesn't even seem that complex. It's a desert, big open spaces, clear skies, lots of emptiness. You'd think it'd be easy to read, but once you're actually driving through it, that logic falls apart pretty fast. The biggest thing working against you is how samey the environment can feel over long stretches. Sand, rock, rusted wreckage, storms on the horizon. Landmarks exist, but they're often far apart, and when you're moving fast in the car, it's easy to lose track of where you're relative to them. You'll spot something in the distance, drive toward it for a while, and then realize you've slightly drifted and are now heading somewhere completely different. Traversal makes it even worse, in a good way. You're almost always in the magnum opus, and speed distorts your sense of distance. You cover a lot of ground quickly, but the terrain doesn't give you strong visual feedback that you've gone far. You're weaving through dunes, canyons, and broken highways, and everything starts to blur together if you're not paying attention. The map is also broken into regions with different threat levels, and crossing between them isn't always obvious. You can push deeper into dangerous territory without realizing it, especially when you're chasing a convoy or following a vague objective marker. Suddenly enemies hit harder, storms roll in, and you feel very aware that you're far from anything safe. Sandstorms deserve a special mention. When one hits, visibility drops, landmarks vanish, and navigation becomes almost impossible. You're reacting moment to moment, trying to survive, and any sense of direction you had just evaporates. Even after the storm clears, it takes a bit to reorient yourself. What really sells the lost feeling, though, is the tone of the world. There's very little comfort, few safe havens, long stretches where it's just you, the car, and the wasteland. That isolation makes every wrong turn feel heavier. Getting lost here isn't peaceful, it's stressful. By the time you spend a lot of hours in Mad Max, you start to recognize areas, but the world never fully opens up into something clean and readable. It stays rough, disorienting, and slightly oppressive. And honestly, that's perfect for the game. The map doesn't want you to feel in control. It wants you to feel like you're barely surviving out there. Alright, so Fallout 4, man, this game it's a lot. Like, when we're talking about maps where you will literally get lost for hours and hours, Fallout 4 is the perfect example of a game that just constantly distracts you from whatever you were supposed to be doing. Because the Commonwealth, which is post-apocalyptic Boston and the surrounding areas, is absolutely packed with stuff. Like, I'm talking hundreds of locations, and you can enter most of the buildings, and there are side quests and random encounters everywhere, and oh yeah, there's also settlement building, which will consume your entire life if you let it. Like, I went into Fallout 4 thinking I'd play through the story and maybe do some side content, and I ended up spending 200 plus hours across multiple playthroughs just exploring every corner of this irradiated wasteland. So you play as the sole survivor, you customize your character, male or female, and you start the game right before the nuclear bombs drop. You see pre-war Boston, you get into Vault 111, you're cryogenically frozen, your spouse gets killed, your baby son Sean gets kidnapped, and you wake up 210 years later in a post-apocalyptic nightmare. And the whole game is ostensibly about finding your son, but let's be real, you're gonna spend most of your time building settlements, collecting junk, exploring ruins, and shooting raiders and super mutants because that's way more fun than the main story. The map itself is set in and around Boston, Massachusetts, and it's not the biggest open-world map in terms of square footage, like it's smaller than Skyrim or The Witcher 3, but it feels massive because of how dense it is. Like, you cannot go 30 seconds without running into something. There are buildings everywhere, most of them explorable, there are enemy camps and monster layers scattered around, there are random encounters constantly popping up. The map is packed, dude, and because it's set in a city and the surrounding suburbs, there's a ton of vertical exploration too. You're not just traversing horizontally, you're going up into ruined skyscrapers, climbing fire escapes, exploring rooftops, going down into subway tunnels and sewers. The amount of layered vertical space is insane. Now, let's talk about what makes you get lost in this map, because oh man, it happens constantly. The big thing is that you're always picking up quests and finding new locations. Like, you'll be walking to a main story objective, and you'll see a building in the distance that's not marked on your map, and you're like, okay, I'll just check that out real quick. And you go inside, and it's a multi-story building full of raiders or super mutants, and you clear it out, and you find some loot, and maybe a terminal with some environmental storytelling about what happened there before the war or after the bombs fell. And that takes 20 minutes. And then you come outside, and you see another location nearby, or you hear gunfire, or a distress signal pops up on your Pip-Boy, and you go investigate that. And before you know it, 3 hours have passed, and you're on the complete opposite side of the map from where you were supposed to go. And the environmental design is really clever. You can see shortcuts and paths, and you're constantly finding new routes. Like, there's a collapsed highway that acts as a bridge between buildings, or there's a fire escape you can climb, or there's a hole in the wall that leads to another area. It's almost like a 3D maze, and it's really cool to navigate. But it's also kind of a pain because the map doesn't really show verticality well. Like, you set a waypoint to a location, and the game says it's 50 feet away, but what it doesn't tell you is that the location is 3 floors up, and you need to find a way to climb there. So you're wandering around trying to figure out how to reach your objective. And the enemy density is high, so you're constantly fighting. And if you're not using power armor or you're low on supplies, it can be genuinely challenging. I think what makes Fallout 4's map so addictive is the loop of explore, fight, loot, return to base, upgrade, repeat. Like, you go out exploring, you fight enemies, you collect a ton of junk and weapons and armor, and then your inventory is full, so you go back to a settlement, you scrap everything for components, you build stuff, you upgrade your gear, and then you head back out. And the loop is satisfying enough that hours just disappear. And the one more location mentality is real. Like, you're heading back to Diamond City to turn in a quest, and you see a location you haven't discovered yet. So you're like, okay, I'll just check that out quick. And then there's another one nearby, and then you're over-encumbered with loot, so you need to find a place to drop stuff or fast travel back. And you're managing your resources. Ammo, stim packs, RadAway, fusion cores. There's a survival element to it that keeps you engaged. Now, I gotta be honest, the main story in Fallout 4 is kind of weak compared to Fallout 3 or New Vegas. Like, the whole find your son motivation doesn't really work when you're spending 100 hours building settlements and exploring instead of actually looking for him. But the environmental storytelling and the side quests and the exploration are strong enough that the weak main story doesn't ruin the game. Now, Spider-Man 2, almost 3 years old, when it came out, I had so much fun with it. But when we're talking about maps that you get lost in, this one's interesting because it's not lost in the traditional sense, like you're wandering around not knowing where you are, but more like you get lost in the flow of just swinging through New York City and doing stuff. Because the map in this game is massive compared to the first Spider-Man game, and it's so dense with activities and side content that you can just lose hours web swinging around and going, oh, I'll just grab this collectible real quick, and suddenly it's 3 a.m. and you've cleared out half of Brooklyn. So the big thing with Spider-Man 2's map is that it basically doubles the size of the first game. The first Spider-Man, that was just Manhattan, right? And Miles Morales, that was also just Manhattan, but like, it was kind of a smaller experience, more focused. But Spider-Man 2, they went all out. You've got all of Manhattan again, which is already pretty big, but now they've added Brooklyn and Queens. And these aren't like small areas either. Brooklyn is huge, Queens is huge, and each borough has its own distinct feel and neighborhoods and all that. And I think the coolest thing about this map is just how different each area feels. Like, Manhattan has that classic New York City vibe with the skyscrapers and the financial district and Times Square and Central Park and Harlem. All the iconic locations from the first game are back, and they look better. But then you swing over to Brooklyn and it's got a different aesthetic, more brownstones and industrial areas, and you've got Coney Island, which is this whole big amusement park area that's actually used for some story missions and side content. The traversal is what makes this map so fun to explore though. Like, swinging through New York as Spider-Man has always been the best part of these games, and they've refined it even more in Spider-Man 2. The web swinging feels so good. It's got that momentum and physics to it where you're building speed as you swing, you're using your environment to slingshot yourself around corners, you're zipping up to points and launching yourself through the air. And they added these web wings, which are basically like a wingsuit. So now you can swing to build momentum and then open the wings and glide across huge distances. And it's so satisfying once you get the rhythm down. Swing, swing, jump, web wings, boost, swing again, zip to a point, launch. You can cross the entire map in just a few minutes if you're really moving. I think what makes the map feel so alive is the density of content combined with how fast and fluid the traversal is. Like, in a lot of open world games, you're running or driving from point A to point B, and it can feel like a chore. But in Spider-Man 2, getting from point A to point B is the fun part. The swinging is so satisfying that you almost want excuses to travel across the map. And because you're moving so fast and the map is so densely packed, you're constantly seeing new things, noticing details you missed before, finding hidden collectibles. Now, I will say the map can feel a bit overwhelming at times. Like, when you open the map screen, there are icons everywhere. Collectibles, side missions, crimes, activities, landmarks, and it can be a lot. The game does a decent job of letting you filter what you see, but there's just so much stuff that it can feel like you're chasing icons on a map rather than organically exploring. But I think the traversal is so fun to explore that it doesn't feel as grindy as it could. And some of the collectibles are definitely padding, like the spider bots are kinda tedious. You're just chasing these little robots all over the city, and it's the same thing 42 times. The photo ops are fine, but they're not super exciting. Some of the EMF experiments are cool, some are annoying. It's hit or miss. But I think the core experience of just being Spider-Man in New York City is so well executed that even the weaker side content is elevated by how fun it is to get around. Like, I'd be annoyed at having to collect my 30th spider bot, but then I'd swing through Times Square at sunset and pull off this perfect combination of swings and flips, and I'd be like, okay, this is still awesome. So yeah, Spider-Man 2's map is massive. It's dense, it's beautiful, and it's incredibly fun to explore. You will absolutely get lost in it, not because you don't know where you're going, but because you'll get distracted by all the stuff to do and the sheer joy of web swinging through New York City. Like, this game consumed me for a solid 2 weeks when it came out. I beat the story pretty quickly, but then I spent another week just cleaning up the map, collecting everything, doing all the side content, unlocking all the suits, taking screenshots, just swinging around, enjoying the city. Watch Dogs 2 is one of those games that I think got overlooked by a lot of people, and it's a shame because the map in this game is genuinely one of my favorite open world maps ever made. Like, I know that sounds like a bold claim, but hear me out. The first Watch Dogs was set in Chicago, and it was fine, but it was pretty dark and gritty and serious, and the map was kind of like, okay, it's a city, you can hack stuff, cool. But Watch Dogs 2 is set in the San Francisco Bay Area, and it's not just San Francisco, it's the entire Bay Area. You've got San Francisco proper, you've got Oakland across the bay, you've got Marin County to the north, and you've got Silicon Valley down south. And each of these areas is huge and distinct and full of stuff to do, and the whole vibe of the game is just so much more fun and colorful and interesting than the first game. So you play as Marcus Holloway, who's part of this hacker collective called DedSec, and the whole game is about taking down corrupt corporations and exposing surveillance and fighting back against the system through hacking. And the hacking is the core mechanic that makes exploring this map so fun, because you can hack basically everything. Like, you can hack traffic lights to cause accidents, you can hack cars to make them drive themselves or explode, you can hack security cameras to scout out areas, you can hack people's phones to steal data or money, you can hack cranes and forklifts and garage doors and ATMs and billboards. The entire city is your playground, and you can manipulate almost everything in it. And this ties into exploration because you're constantly using hacking to navigate the world and find secrets and complete objectives. Like, you might see a restricted area that you need to get into, and instead of just running in guns blazing, though you can do that if you want, you can hack the cameras to scout it out, then hack a forklift to create a distraction, then hack a door to sneak in, then hack the security system to avoid detection. Or you can just send in your drone or your RC car to do the whole thing for you without ever stepping foot in there yourself. The map is also huge in terms of square footage. Like, driving from the northern tip of Marin County down to the southern end of Silicon Valley takes a good 10-15 minutes, and that's if you're driving fast and not stopping for anything. And of course you're going to stop for things because there's stuff everywhere. So yeah, Watch Dogs 2's map is massive, it's diverse, it's full of personality and detail, and it will absolutely make you get lost, both in the sense of losing track of time as you explore and experiment, and in the sense of just wandering around checking out all the cool locations. The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt, like, where do I even start with this one? This is probably one of the best examples of a game map that is not only absolutely massive, but also so dense with quality content that you will lose hundreds of hours to it without even realizing. Like, I'm not exaggerating when I say I put over 200 hours into this game across multiple playthroughs, and I still found stuff I'd missed. The map in The Witcher 3 is genuinely one of the greatest open world maps ever created, and it will absolutely consume your life if you let it. So you play as Geralt of Rivia, this monster hunter witcher guy, and you're searching for Ciri, who's basically your adoptive daughter, and along the way you're taking contracts to hunt monsters, getting involved in political intrigue, playing Gwent, which I'll get to, and just exploring this massive, living, breathing fantasy world. And the game is split up into several distinct regions, each one massive in its own right. You start in White Orchard, which is the tutorial area, and White Orchard alone is pretty big. Like, it's a self-contained region with multiple villages, monster contracts, side quests, hidden treasures, and it probably takes like 8 to 10 hours to fully explore if you're doing everything. And you think, okay, this is a decent sized map for an open world game, and then you leave White Orchard and you get to Velen and you realize, oh, White Orchard was just the prologue. Velen is absolutely enormous. Velen, also called No Man's Land, is this war-torn, swampy, miserable region in the northern part of the map, and it is huge. Like, genuinely one of the biggest single regions I've ever seen in a game. It's got forests and swamps and villages and battlefields and bandit camps and monster nests and hidden grottos and ancient ruins, and it just goes on forever. And the whole region has this oppressive, dark atmosphere because it's been ravaged by war. The Nilfgaardian Empire is invading from the south, and Velen is caught in the middle. So everywhere you go, you see burned villages, hanged men on trees, refugees, soldiers, bandits taking advantage of the chaos. It's grim, dude, like really grim. But it's also incredibly atmospheric and immersive. And connected to Velen, but like completely different in vibe, is Novigrad, which is this massive city. And when I say massive, I mean it's one of the biggest cities I've ever seen in a game. It's got multiple districts: the main city, the docks, the slums, the trade quarter, the temple district, and each district is packed with NPCs and shops and quests and secrets, and the city feels alive in a way that a lot of game cities don't. Like, you can wander through the streets and overhear conversations, see street performers, watch public executions, and stumble into political intrigue, and there are so many quests that start in Novigrad. Main story quests, side quests, romance quests, crime investigations. You can easily spend 40-50 hours just in Novigrad and Velen doing all the content. So when you add it all up, White Orchard, Velen, Novigrad, Skellige, and the DLC areas, you're looking at one of the biggest game maps ever made. And not just big in terms of square footage, but big in terms of content density. Like, every region is packed with stuff to do. The atmosphere and environmental storytelling in this game is incredible. Like, you could just ride through a forest in Velen and stop and look around and see the details. The hanged corpses, the crows, the abandoned carts, the burned farmhouses, and it all tells a story about the war and the suffering. The alchemy and crafting systems also tie into exploration, like you're constantly gathering herbs and monster parts as you explore the world. You see plants and you pick them up to use in potions, you kill monsters and you loot them for ingredients, and then you craft potions and oils and bombs that are actually useful in combat. And the game has this meditation system, where if you meditate with alcohol in your inventory, all your potions refill, so you're not constantly grinding for ingredients. It respects your time in that way. Now, I will say, Skellige can be a bit of a pain to explore because there are so many question marks in the ocean, and a lot of them are just smugglers' caches underwater, and swimming to them and looting them gets pretty tedious after a while. Like the first few times, it's cool, you're diving underwater, fighting drowners, finding treasure, but after you've done it 50 times, it's like, okay, I get it, there's stuff in the ocean. But the islands themselves are great to explore. Like each island in Skellige has its own character. Some are inhabited, some are wild, some have monster layers, some have hidden treasures, and the scenery is gorgeous. The northern islands with the snow and the mountains, the southern islands with the forests and valleys, it's all really well done. The main story takes you all over the map too, which is great because it gives you reasons to visit different regions and see different parts of the world. Like you're searching for Ciri, and your search takes you from Velen to Novigrad to Skellige and back, and along the way you're recruiting allies, making choices that affect the story, getting involved in political conflicts between Nilfgaard and the northern kingdoms, dealing with the Wild Hunt, who are these spectral warriors chasing Ciri. I think one of my favorite things about The Witcher 3's map is just how much there is to discover organically. Like, yeah, there are question marks and quest markers, but there's also just stuff you stumble upon. You're riding through a forest and you find a cave that's not marked, and inside there's a monster or a treasure or a note that tells a story. Or you're exploring a village and you overhear NPCs talking and it triggers a quest. The world is full of these little moments of discovery that make exploration feel natural rather than checklist-driven.